right, let's get started. And if you hear the dings, that's just people joining in later. Welcome to another teleconference that NOAA is putting on. Tonight's topic is building positive self-esteem in your child. My name is Sheila Adamo, and a couple housekeeping issues. If you're Father Jim Warnke is our speaker tonight, so he's going to talk about building self-esteem. So as he's talking, if you could, keep your phones on mute until you have a question. We have had a couple email requests if we can put this, even just the conversation online, so people could listen because they had conflicts with tonight's time. If that's okay with everybody, I will forego introducing ourselves so that that's not on the call. And when you speak, when you have a question, if you do not feel comfortable giving your name, you don't need to. Unless someone clearly objects, I would like to offer that to the people who weren't able to make tonight's call. But I wanted to let you guys know that. So we're lucky enough tonight that Father Jim Warnke, who is a MA, MSW, LCSW, who some of us have heard, and we're lucky enough to meet him at he's presented at a NOAA conference before. He had 2 full days of presentations, I believe, on all different topics. We worked him very hard. That was in
Las Vegas.
That's what I thought. That was in Vegas. Jim has been in practice as a psychotherapist for more than 30 years in New Jersey. He's legally blind from birth. He has specialized in helping children, adolescents, and adults adjust to vision loss. He has presented, like I said, all over the United States, Canada, and Mexico. He has been married for 41 years to his wife, Marie, and a special education teacher in the public schools in New Jersey, and he has 2 grown children. And
2 grandbabies.
Oh, yay. That's not on here.
5 and 2.
Wow. So without further ado, Jim, you can take it over, and thank you again for being our guest speaker.
Thank you very much, and I can't tell you how pleased I am to be here. If at any point anyone cannot hear me, please find a way to indicate that, and I'll try and raise my voice. I'm at the limit of what I can do on my telephone. And also please know I'm using a computer and a CCTV in order to read my notes, so if I get a little flummoxed from time to time, I hope you'll be patient with me. I imagine our time together to be at least as much a conversation as a presentation, and so I hope to open up with some ideas about just kind of getting us into the arena of self-esteem and self-worth, and then to kind of just give an overview of some principles of parenting. And again, my baby is 33 and my oldest is 40, and I now have 2 little ones, grandchildren. And one of the things that it's reminded me as I visit my son having 2 children under 5 is that it's actually as hard as I remembered it was. And so anybody who survives until their youngest child's 10th birthday should take themselves out for a really nice dinner because it's a good thing to do. Raising children is a very difficult, although extraordinarily wonderful endeavor. It's more hard work than anybody can possibly imagine, but I can tell you, having 2 adult children, that the joys in it are just extraordinary, as I'm sure most of you have already begun to experience. So, what is this self-esteem stuff? This is a phrase that gets tossed around a lot, particularly by people who are therapists and counselors. Well, self-esteem has to do with our ability to believe in our own ability to think and to cope we believe that we can, in our own minds, we can think and we can cope and we can get along and master life's life's challenges, and that we have the ability also to sort of value and to cherish ourselves and to believe that we have a right to be happy and a right to be successful. And there are very few things as important in the emerging life of a child as high and hard to disrupt self-esteem. In a book called The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, a fellow named Nathaniel Braden suggests that self-esteem is the immune system of one's conscious life. It's what helps us when we come across the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that we ordinarily experience in life, and allows us to continue to move forward with grace and courage. Now, self-esteem is both something that is caused by our actions and something that results from our actions. If we behave competently, that helps to build self-esteem. If we feel competent, we have a tendency to behave competently and to feel good about ourselves. So you can break into that kind of a metronome on either side in terms of enhancing and cultivating self-esteem. It's not possible for a parent to give their children self-esteem any more than it's possible for a parent to digest their child's food, or to, ride a bicycle for them, or to, learn how to potty train them. That's something the child has to do for themselves, and so is acquiring self-esteem, and yet parents and the way children are parented really can have a lot to do with enhancing the way kids feel about themselves and the way they experience themselves. And there are several practices that I just ways of living that really have something to do with this. First is living consciously, and by that I mean, being awake and aware and not wandering through life half asleep, unaware of what you're doing, unaware of the effect that you are having on other people or the effect that other people are having on you. Conscious living gives us the ability to make choices, and that brings us to the next pattern that's helpful, and that's a pattern of self-acceptance. Self-acceptance means kind of getting to know ourselves the way we actually are. Most people have trouble in life for one of two reasons. They either have no idea what they're actually like, and they try to live a good life anyway. That's roughly the equivalent of not knowing any of the sizes for your clothing and going into the mall and trying to buy an outfit of clothes. By happenstance, something will probably fit, but it won't be good. You need to know what sizes you actually are in order to be able to clothe yourself properly. Another reason that people have difficulties is that they kind of have a pretty good sense of what they're really like, but they don't like it. And so they pretend that somehow they're different from the way they really are. And that's roughly the equivalent of someone deciding, I take size 8 shoes, but that means I have big feet and I don't like it, so I'm only going to buy size 6 because that's what my feet should be. If you do that, you condemn yourself to a life of pain and probably being really irritable with the people around you. Self-acceptance is, as I said, having a sense of what you're really like and knowing and believing that you can live a good and satisfactory life even though you are just what you are. Another pattern in the development of self-esteem has to do with self-responsibility, taking responsibility for our own thoughts, beliefs, actions, desires. We live in a culture that, frankly, teaches us not to be responsible. It's always somebody else's fault. Have you been injured in any way? There's a lawyer that will get you a great big cash settlement. and, God forbid something goes wrong at school or at work, I didn't do it, the dog ate my homework, the check's in the mail, blah, blah, blah. High self-esteem, good self-esteem, has a lot to do with a person taking responsibility for themselves, for their actions, for what they think and believe in the way they live, even in the face of people who may not like it or who may, in fact, disagree with it. Another pattern has to do with self-assertiveness, which is not to say aggression. Self-assertiveness is understanding that while it's not always my turn, sometimes it actually is my turn. I have a right to that. I have a right to have a place in the world. I have a right not to be picked on or beaten up or treated badly, and that I am going to assert myself in the face of things that would not allow me to live that way. The pattern of living life purposefully. Things to do that mean something to us, one or the other. Now, by the way, some people collect. I have a friend who collects buttons. Some children, they like to run and play. Other children like to read books. Doesn't matter what the purpose is, as much as that you have a purpose and that it's yours and that you value it. And finally, living a life of integrity, which means living according to values that are your own, that are your family's, that you've internalized, and holding yourself responsible to live in ways that are according to one's own values and beliefs. So when you think of self-esteem, those are the things I want you to kind of have in mind. Nurturing a child, as we think about parenting, nurturing a child is really loving a kid, just loving a kid. My wife's a special ed teacher, and she says when parents come in to see her, she teaches preschool now, and she was in kindergarten for 25 years. She said, when she sits down with a mother and a dad and they begin to tell her about, little Sally, and she's wonderful and she loves horses and she likes this and she likes that and her favorite backpack. Oh, and by the way, maybe she has this disability or that disability, and then we need to talk about that. She can pretty much predict that this child is going to be okay. She said when parents come in and they sound like the social worker on the child study team, and they have medical reports and this and that and the other thing, she said she worries about those children. Why? Because you'll have a social worker on a child study team. You'll have professionals who work with a child, but you know what? You get a mom and a dad. And the most important thing is that children experience themselves as loved. And, not everybody's a gushy, kissy-faced person, but you know what? If people love you, you kind of know it because they tell you in 1,000 different ways. A child needs to be nurtured and encouraged towards the ultimate gain of living life independently. Okay? We're supposed to separate and individuate. You know that old saying about parents, first giving children roots and then giving children wings. I like to think of it as a good parent. In a good family, a parent is like a diving board on a swimming pool, bolted into the cement on one end so that the child can take a running leap because you're flexible as all get out on the other. Appropriate to the child's age and developmental needs. And so just leaving children to run wild and do whatever they feel like, that's not really respecting them or respecting their feelings. That's being neglectful. And being authoritarian and overly rigid, that's not helpful either. It's a matter of balance, and different children have different personalities, and different parents have different personalities, and so we're looking to try and find the best match that we can, with our kids. It's sort of like a exercise in Goldilocks. Some beds were too hard and some beds were too soft, and then there was the bed that was just right. Well, in being a parent, you don't have to be just right. You just need to be good enough of the time, okay? And parents, I want you now to take a look at your right hand, okay? Okay, now I want you to take a look at your wrong hand. You don't have one, do you? Because the opposite of right is not always wrong. The opposite of right is sometimes just what's left, you know? A good parent, a loving parent, is someone who is good enough of the time. Kids are wonderful and very forgiving, and really appreciate all that their parents do for them, except sometimes between the ages of 14 and 17. That's a little bit of a problem there, but I think for most of you that's well into the future. So let's just think about some approaches to parenting that are effective, that we should look for if the goal is that the child should begin to develop effective self-esteem, to have a good sense of themselves, and to internalize that as they get older and older. Okay, hold on. My paper just slipped off the cable on the CCTV. Okay, and here we go again. I'm fine. I'm back where we were. Let's see. Okay. I don't know exactly how to think about them. I used to think about them with my kids as sort of family policies. You know what? That mom and dad are kind of the policy makers. You know, we consult with grandma and grandpa, and sometimes we, consult with the kids as well. But basically, parents are the ones who, set policies for living consciously, with self-acceptance, with self-responsibility, self-assertiveness, purposefully, and with integrity. Something that really helps the kid is the idea that a child needs, from a very early age, to experience itself as seen and heard, okay? And this has some tricky and interesting implications for kids who are visually impaired. I'm visually impaired, not from albinism, but from a variety of other conditions. I've been legally blind since infancy. I've always wanted to be illegally blind, but I could never figure out how to do that. Even here in New Jersey, I can't seem to find the correct statute. But one of the things for those of us who are visually impaired that's a significant issue is that it's hard for us to always see and interpret nonverbal communication from those around us and from important people in our lives: mother, father, sister, brother, teacher, people in the neighborhood. And so some of what a child with vision, some of what they see and take in visually has to be, as a child gets old enough to understand language, it has to be mediated through language, because it's hard for us to see the expressions on other people's face with clarity sometimes, or to read them, in an effective sort of way. What do I mean when I say a kid needs to feel like they're heard and responded to? Well, I mean this. It's paying attention to what the child's experience is and treating that experience as if it was important, as if it had meaning, even when they're teeny tiny. Now, that doesn't mean telling the child they're wonderful at all times, okay, because that's simply not true, unless, of course, you have children that were, not actually born on Earth. Children that are born on Earth are not wonderful and charming at all times in all places, and so telling them that they are is actually a real mistake. But it rather has to do with communicating to children that their needs, that their desires, that the way they think about things has value, even if you don't agree with the way they see things or experience things, even if you can't allow them to have what they want or to do what they want in a particular moment. So for example, when my 2-year-old granddaughter comes over and she wants to have ice cream a half hour before dinner, well, that's not something her mom and dad are going to allow, and it's not something that I'm going to allow. But if I want for her to experience herself as being seen and heard and appreciated, first, I don't tell her she's bad or stupid for wanting ice cream. She wants ice cream. And I say, I'm sorry, honey. It's dinner time is soon. You can't, you can't have it yet. I'm really sorry. I bet that makes you unhappy, I will say as she is standing there with tears coming down her cheek. Okay. She can't have what she wants, but we didn't treat her as if she didn't matter. Okay? Or 4.5-year-old child, says to, mom says, I'm going out to the market, and the child says, can I come too? And mom says, no, you have to stay home, honey, because I have to move, fast. I'm a little bit late. And again, maybe this doesn't represent any of your kids, so this child then puts on her little coat, stomps out into the driveway, and leans against the car door with her arms folded, looking like a grump, so that mom is going to have to physically move her to get into the car. Okay. Well, a way that would diminish self-esteem would be to go out and say, you are a nasty, rotten little snot bag. How dare you, treat me like that. I'm going to swat you in the head, get out of the way, go in the house. Okay? Now, it's perfectly legitimate to think all of those things, okay? And in fact, if sometimes you don't think all of those things, you probably need psychiatric care because they will run through your mind, okay? But it's not appropriate or useful to the child to say them. What is appropriate would to be say something like, honey, mommy said you're not going to the market, and that's what mommy means. That makes you unhappy right now, doesn't it? Yes, grumps the child. And you say, well, I'm sorry that you feel unhappy, but that's the way it has to be, and you can either be unhappy till mommy gets back, or you can go inside and play with your sister and, enjoy watching a video with the babysitter. That's really your choice, but gotta go. And physically moving her if that is what is necessary. Why? Because it's very important in parenting that parents have and exercise, again, authority, not tyranny. Any child who lives in a home where the parents aren't in charge is an orphan by definition, even if they live with their mom and dad. Parents have to make decisions for kids. The younger the kid, the more the decisions they have to make. But it still doesn't mean we don't validate and value the way they feel about things, the way they experience things. Okay? Now, we may have to teach them, in fact, we do have to teach them how to express those things. Okay? Nobody likes a child that's not well behaved. Okay? If you've all been out in McDonald's or the market and seen people with children who are just terribly behaved. Okay? And nobody likes those kids. And that's not doing them any favor. You don't have to beat them. You don't have to call them names. But you do have to have a standard of behavior that you insist on and that the children have to comply with pretty much all the time. Now, another thing that happens in our culture sometimes is, we're a culture of choices. And sometimes we flood our children with choices. Well, honey, what do you want for breakfast, dear? Do you want banana nut Cheerios, egg cream? You list 15 things. Kid, little kid can't figure that out. Now, it might be helpful to say you can have Cheerios and bananas, or you can have pancakes. Which would you like? No mother or father worth their salt is going to say to, a 3-year-old, do you want to wear a sweater, honey, if the parent has already determined it's cold enough for a sweater. But the parent might say, you can wear your octopus sweatshirt or your red sweater, which would you like? You have to wear one, and then that gets enforced. Why? Because then children begin to learn that they can, in fact, live up to the reasonable expectations of the people who love them and who are structuring their lives. And that will help them develop a really positive, long-lasting, and resilient, sense of self, of high self-esteem and self-esteem that's, hard to disrupt, okay? One of my favorite examples, and I cannot remember where I heard it, I apologize too, is, in the way that we speak to children. Think about it. If your boss came over for dinner and reaching across the table knocked over a glass of water, you wouldn't say, "I told you not to be stupid. How many times have I told you not to spill things? What's wrong with you?" That's an unlikely response. Why would anybody then think it would be okay to talk to a child that way? Okay? Important, if we want children to learn how to be respectful, that we treat them with respect. By the way, even when we're angry with them. Okay? Many more times than 500 when my kids were little, and probably about 500 now, since my granddaughters have been born, I have had to walk out of the room to compose myself, child therapist that I am, before I go back in and deal with something that's been going on with one of the kids. Why? Because my rule for myself is I can't speak to a child in a tone of voice or in a manner or using language that I would not accept the child or another adult speaking to me. Why? Because children learn by what they experience more than they learn by what they're told. Okay? That old adage, do as I say, not as I do? Well, that's not so much. That doesn't work real well. Better to know that they will imitate our behavior, sometimes to our chagrin. I remember my wife, when our daughter was about 3 years old, dragging me by the ear into the playroom, and my sweet little bunsy baby girl was sitting there trying to put Legos together unsuccessfully, saying, "Damn it, damn it, damn it." And my wife said she didn't get that from me, which also was sadly true. So we want to try and nurture our children by having realistic, age-appropriate expectations, and then by offering them reasonable, age-appropriate choices, and then seeing and supporting the idea that they will then follow through on those things. Just give me a second. I have to check the time. Okay, I just have one or two more things to say, and then I'd like to open this up to question and answers. There has been in the last few years a generation of parenting where people have misunderstood the idea of unconditional love and unconditional positive regard for praising the child when they haven't actually done anything to be praised for. Good job, I hear over and over again when the kid hasn't done anything much. If you praise a child and there's nothing to praise them for, what you teach the child is, I can't trust my mom. I can't trust my dad. They just say stuff that isn't true. Okay? The same would be true if you criticize them in ways that are hurtful or denigrating. Better to observe a child's behavior. I always like to say, you really want to watch your kids like a hawk until you catch them doing it right. And every time you catch them doing something right, don't be effusive, but describe what they're doing, tell them why you like it, and tell them that it pleases you. Hey, Michael, I told you to pick up the blocks. And look, I'm looking and all the blocks are on the shelf right where they belong. Wow, that makes me feel really good, thank you. Okay? Rather than, good boy. What does good boy mean? Okay? That's a hard thing to process. Okay? Or even good job unless you specify what the job was. Okay? Or, hey, Michael, I told you to pick up the blocks. You got most of them, but look around. Okay? Look around. Look over here by the couch. Okay? I think maybe you might find something that you need to put on. There you go. You got it. Good job. Good fella. You found the blocks that you missed the first time. I'm delighted that you were persistent. Good going, kiddo. Let's go do whatever we have to do. So, these are fairly simple ideas. but sort of based on them and based on your own thoughts and reading and interest in fostering positive self-esteem with your children. Let's now open it up to some question and answer. I will tell you that I have yet to hear a stupid question in 35 years of practice and work, 33 years, I guess, of practice and work. I've heard some stupid answers, many of them my own, so I'll try and avoid those if possible. But how can I help you? What would you like to know? And I'm going to trust you, my friend, to sort of moderate this for me, okay?
Does anyone have any specific questions that are on their mind that they would like to ask?
Yes, this is Sean Wade in San Antonio, Texas. How many times? Oh, hi. How many times do you think is acceptable to warn your child before you put them into maybe timeout or some kind of disciplinary action?
Okay. Think of baseball. Okay? You say something once, strike one. Say something twice, strike two. When you are making the third statement, you are in motion. Okay? If you want to avoid losing your temper with your child, you have to move faster. Most people make the mistake of waiting to act until they're really angry. Then all the child gets is the anger. Okay? So I never tell, my rule is I would never tell a child to do something more than 3 times, and the third time I'm already up and moving. Not necessarily even angrily. They're going into timeout or they're going to go do what I told them to do. Now, if you have a child that tends to push limits, some kids have that personality. If you have a child who tends to push limits, give them fewer chances. And that's what I think. You're welcome.
Very helpful.
How else can I help you?
Jim, I had a question about, this is Sheila, about specifically the children with visual impairments and
yes, ma'am.
How that kind of plays games in parents, myself included, head of, I think I fall into the trap of probably praising too much, especially when my son was younger, because, you know, to be honest, I was just glad he was doing it. So,
sure.
And then sometimes I wonder how that would impact him and his ability to feel competent in something, and where I might step in where I wouldn't even dream of stepping in with my other kids and praising him when he doesn't need it.
Okay. I mean, first of all, I want you to be really patient with yourselves, okay? Raising children is difficult. Raising children with disabilities is more difficult. And that you notice that they didn't come with a little operational manual pinned to their bottom when they were born. So what I would suggest you think about is, you know, whatever you did yesterday, that was yesterday. Okay? Today's today and tomorrow's tomorrow. You always get a do-over. And so you might move in close to the child who's visually impaired, right? And really watch and observe. If the child is pre-verbal, if they're really little, they don't have a lot of language, and watch to see what they're struggling with, and give them just, you know, look at your watch, time it for a minute just to see how they do. And if they seem to become frustrated, then maybe you want to move in and be helpful. As the child gets older and develops language, the best thing I can think of to do is to ask, okay? You seem to be really working really hard at that. Would you like me to help you? Okay? If the child says yes, help. Now, also, you'll get to a point where children, you don't want them to be overly dependent on your help, where you become the coach, okay? Where you say to the kid, okay, you know, it's something you know they can do because they've done it 42 times. Say, okay, we take it easy, take some deep breaths. We know you can do this. Just take your time, or, take a break. We'll come back to it later. Because everything, and then the child succeeds on themselves, say, you did it. How did that feel? Right? You did it. How did that feel? Okay. My granddaughters are not visually impaired, but this is a worthy example. At the older girls, her 5th birthday party, they were having a little pajama party, although it wasn't an overnight. And Mommy had taken them out to buy new pajamas at Kmart. And the little one, the 2-year-old, had got a sweet little pair of pajamas that she liked. Well, her sister, the older girl, her birthday, comes out and says, Lucy, it's time for the party. Let me help you put your pajamas on. And Beatrice, the older girl, was trying to help the little one get her head through the top of the pajamas. And she tried once, and she tried twice, and 3 times, and by 4 times I was sitting there, and I said, excuse me, Bea, would you like Grandpa to help you? And she looked at me and she said, no, thank you, Grandpa. I think I will do it myself, please. Okay. And she tried to put it on the little one's head, and the 2-year-old says, as it flips off, you can do it, Bea. I watched her attempt it 11 times until she got her head through. In which case, the 2 girls danced up and down, and the 2-year-old said, knew you'd do it, Bea. Okay? So again, you have your eyes, so you watch and you observe. Now, with a child who's visually impaired, many times you'll move in quickly because of your own anxiety, okay? Because who wants a kid to get hurt, or who wants a kid to, decompensate into tears? That's okay, except you probably want to practice some deep breathing and give the child as much of an opportunity as you notice that they can manage. Okay? Now, there are other children I would not have let it go on that long because the older child would have become angry or frustrated, but I would have waited to observe that behavior before I intervened. I don't know if that's helpful, but...
Yeah, that helps.
Hi, I have a question about if a child is kind of receiving negative images from her peers, how you would reinforce that self-esteem at home if no one else is reinforcing it, at school or something like that.
Okay, so negative images for what?
Well, I'm just, I'm looking into the future. My daughter has albinism, and I'm concerned with her low vision and her different appearance, that there may be times that kids at school are not supportive or not friendly, give her a hard time. And I'm just curious what ways I could sort of compensate for that or keep her feeling good about herself if other people are trying to make her feel bad about herself.
Okay. So you're probably right that children can actually be as cruel and mean as adults sometimes. But often negative responses come, just because kids and adults don't understand. Particularly, when eye contact is a difficult problem for the, visually impaired. It's how we know it's our turn to talk. It's how we know somebody's looking at us. Those are very, dicey things for kids to negotiate. But I would start, if the child comes home from school having had a bad day, I'd say, gee, tell me about it. Okay? Well, so-and-so was mean to me. Okay, well, that's not specific enough. Well, what did they actually do? What did they say that, that was mean? I want to understand, And, the child will tell you. And, again, the question, gee, it sounds like that made you feel really kind of icky, did it? It's okay to speculate about how a kid feels, but then you have to check with them so that okay, well, I don't know. They call me stupid. Okay, well, okay. Do you think you're stupid, honey? That would be the first question. Okay. And she said, well, I said, I said, why? Why do you think you're stupid? I don't, it doesn't make any sense to me. I can't imagine why you would think that way. or a kid, when they're out playing ball and, they're having trouble negotiating the ball, they laughed at me and they just said I'm clumsy. Well, no, honey, you're not clumsy. You're visually impaired. You're having trouble with the ball because you can't see it the way the other kids do. Okay? So, what could you and I do now that would help you feel okay? That would be a question I would ask when the kid came home. And it would be important at moments like that, too. Different families have different values, but I think it's important to accept the child's feelings, when they're negative or when they're angry, although you may have to, teach them how to express that, okay? In other words, if the child, if the 5-year-old says, well, I think they're just duty heads, you can say, well, okay, I get that. That's easy for me to understand. In this family, we kind of don't call people duty heads, but then you would have to tell the child some words that they could use that would express their anger. And they would really have to be angry words. And there are acceptable angry words in, adult human conversation. By the way, one of my favorite techniques with a kid who's being called names, go to the dictionary, look up a word that has 4 to 5 syllables that does not mean anything bad that no child that age would ordinarily know. And then teach your child to say it as if it was the worst curse in the world. And then send them back to school. And when the children call them a name, they can say, well, you're transcendental meditation. And the other little child will say, what would you call me? And then your child will be able to say, well, I guess you're the one who's not so smart because you don't even know what that means. Even if the child doesn't do it, sometimes having a strategy of something that they have permission to do can be helpful. But also to encourage the child that sometimes to go to school you have to be brave. The world is not an easy place. Now I'm not talking about 6-year-old boot camp, but rather saying, honey, I know it felt terrible. But the only thing that happened was you got your feelings hurt. Okay? And you know what? Anybody that really gets to know you is probably going to like you. And the ones who really get to know you and don't like you, that just means that you're not their flavor. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with them. So, So we need to teach children how to defend themselves and how to protect themselves verbally and sometimes other ways, and to be supportive of their experience in a particular situation without necessarily trying to overmanage it.
Mm-hmm.
So what else you got, guys?
I'm getting a lot of feedback on my call. If people could check and see. Yeah, it sounds
to me like there's a dog eating food or something, or there's a really loud baby nursing. I don't know what it is.
It does, yeah. So if people could check and make sure, like, if they're not talking, if they do *1 and they're on mute, maybe that will help. I'm not sure why the feedback is coming, but it would be nice if that doesn't stop. Oh.
I have a question. My name is Becky, and
Hi.
I actually have 2 children with albinism. My son is 9, and my daughter is 8, and they both have albinism, therefore both legally blind. Jonathan's vision is less functional than his sister Meg's, although it doesn't stop him. I mean, he rides a bike like, bat out of heck on wheels. It's really friendly. He snowboards. I mean, nothing stops him. If he decides he's going to do it, he does it. His sister is exactly the opposite. Her, visually, the PD ophthalmologist says, she should be right up there with him. It's just she's, he's, for whatever reason, choosing not to maximize what she has.
Mm-hmm.
Her brother, who, you would think would probably be her strongest advocate and ally, is having an extremely hard time understanding and coping with the differences with her and what she can't or won't do for herself. And his frustration level is really eating away at her. How do I help her, and how do I help him?
Okay, and again, I feel free to offer you. All I can offer you is ideas. You take any of them that are interesting or useful and experiment with them. Okay.
Absolutely, I already that dictionary idea. That's going in the.
That's one of my favorites, by the way. I invented that working with actually a totally blind 7-year-old boy 20 years ago in total frustration. The great creativity comes out of frustration. The first thing I would think is that it's probably good to first try and have a conversation with each child, but separately, individually. Okay?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Okay, the first thing I would suggest is, and this is generic, okay? When you don't know what to do, observe and inquire, okay? So I would have a conversation with each child separately, or maybe even more than one, separately. I'd ask your daughter, so, your brother does all this stuff. I mean, kind of what's up with you? What is it like for you to have a brother who does all this stuff? And I'd be particularly interested, is there anything that you're not doing that you really want to do? She may not care about snowboarding. She may not want to ride a bike. Okay? To me, a limitation is when I want to do something and I can't get myself to do it. Not when somebody else thinks I should do something and can't get me to do it. So I would really mock. Gee, that's really interesting. Tell me all you can. Think about it. Come back. Think about it. Go back the next day. Have another conversation. And is it hard to be around your brother who's this, just this? He's out there just doing everything and blah blah blah. Just to find out what she thinks. Then I have a similar conversation with her brother. Okay. Why do you think it bothers you so much that your sister isn't out there riding bikes with you and snowboarding with you or whatever, to see if that's really what's bothering him, okay?
I think for him, a lot of times he feels like because he is as low vision as she is, and he's older, he feels he needs to take a more protective role.
Good. That's what a big brother should do. I'm the oldest of 7. That's great. But tell him being a good big brother doesn't mean ragging on his little sister.
We've tried that.
Okay. No, see, if he's trying to be a big brother, a good big brother, then what you can do is to help him figure out ways. The only person on earth who will know if he's a good big brother is his sister. And if he really wants to be a good and loving, protective big brother, it's got to feel that way to her, right?
Yeah.
And so then you might ask her, well, he really wants to be a good big brother to you. What would he have to do or not do so that you would think, boy, I really love my brother. He's a really good big brother. I'll bet you $100 she'll tell you.
Yes, she will.
Okay? And so again, the principle is when you don't understand something or you're not sure if you understand it, observe, right? Because you can learn things from what you observe. And then, your children are old enough that you can begin to, it's a kid's conversation, but you can have a conversation with them. Okay, then I would start to have a conversation with them. And again, maybe more than one, a couple of short ones, and then if it seemed appropriate, you might sit the two of them down and see if they can talk to one another. Now, that may be too much for them, okay?
Yeah.
That might very well be way too much for them. And if it is, you would stop the action and you would say, you're really both quite young, and I'm so proud of you for trying to have this conversation. But you're 8 and you're 9. By the time you're 16 and 15, you're going to be doing this. I just thought we'd give it a shot. But Mommy made a mistake. Okay?
Yeah.
My bad, kid. Glad you gave it the old school try. But I would try something like that, and see how it goes. If it's still a problem after you've tried that, give me a call and I'll try again.
Super duper. I thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. Are you kidding? All of you people are working very hard to be good parents to visually impaired kids. I used to be a visually impaired kid. You think I'm not going to have affection for you? Come on.
Well, thank you.
No, I grew up in a family where it was not acceptable to have a disability, which was really tough on me and my retarded sister. They dumped me in the playground and said, fend for yourself. But, and I'm not ragging on my mother died. I'm not ragging on my dad. This was the 1950s. Nobody knew nothing.
Yeah.
So let me see how much time we have left. We got a couple of more minutes. Any more questions I can help you with? Everybody still there? Hello?
I guess another question I have in terms of when my daughter starts school, would you recommend that she just kind of announce to everybody she has albinism, she has low vision, or should she just kind of proceed and see how things go along with the other kids?
How old?
Well, she's 4 months old right now.
Okay, no. Okay, so you've got some time.
I have some time. Okay. I'm talking about maybe preschool or kindergarten.
Now here's what I would suggest. And this is, I'm stealing from my wife here, who's worked with early childhood kids, often with a whole myriad of disabilities. Obviously, there are privacy issues, okay? Mm-hmm. However, the kids who seem to do best are the ones who talk about their disability the same way they talk about their favorite lunchbox. Mm-hmm. My name is Jimmy, and this is my white cane, or my eyes are broken. They don't work quite right, and so I may need to ask you who you are, or various things like that. Now, again, let's think developmentally. That's not something a preschool child can do for themselves.
Right.
Okay? So that's something you and the teacher might collaborate on and do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, you don't have, remember, you're talking to little kids. If you are talking to 3-year-olds, you cannot use words of more than 2 syllables, and you cannot say more words than you could write on a half a sheet of paper before you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's their attention span. Okay? By the time they get a little bit older, let's say middle school, in my opinion, they should be sitting in on their IEP meetings, or at least part of them. Okay? They don't get the final say in middle school, but they need to be able to say some of what's going on. And again, parents need to sit down and talk to their kids about what they think would be helpful and what they think wouldn't, and whether the kid is resistant to this or resistant to that. Okay, again, kids in middle school don't decide, but they should get an opinion, right? Mm-hmm. By the time they go to high school, okay, they might need the assistance of a guidance counselor. In 9th grade, mom and dad shouldn't be going in with them. Mom and dad should have met with everybody, but you should then be coaching the 9th and 10th grader on how to do it themselves, maybe with the assistance of an adult that's not mom or dad, like a guidance counselor. Why? Because when they go to college, you're kind of a lot to pack in a suitcase. They're going to have to advocate for themselves, okay? Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between what you get in an IEP, right, which is, best needs of the child, least restrictive environment, and 504, or reasonable accommodation. Those are way bigger nets. They don't have as much fine mesh. Mm-hmm. So by the time a kid goes to college, they still may not be able to do it all by themselves, but they need to know how to get help when they need it. So, in other words, if that's the goal in mind, you think, okay, what are the small increments we have to take to get there.
Right.
Okay. There's a wonderful book called The Process of Parenting. I don't get a kickback for this. It's a commercial book. It's not about disability, but it's about normal child development. Okay? And this is a very, very helpful thing for you to read. There's a generic book by Dean and Naomi Tuttle called Adjusting with Vision Loss, Self-Esteem and Visual Impairment and Blindness. Everybody who's got a visually impaired kid should read this book. It's a little textbooky, but it's really well worth reading. And so you want to do it developmentally appropriate and age appropriate for the child. That's the thing you want to shoot for. Okay,
thank you.
This is Becky again. Would you mind if I just jumped in with something?
Not at all.
Again, talking about the differences between my two kids, here they are in somewhat the same boat, but again, they handle everything so differently. I think, your little one is still really little and you have a lot of time yet, but I think it's really important to take your cues for how to approach that from them and what they want. My daughter will walk into school or will walk anywhere and say to somebody, I can't see that because my eyes don't quite work the same as yours. Could you tell me what that says? Whereas my son, would be absolutely mortified to do that or to have anybody know something like that. So I think it's really important to just let your kiddo lead on what to tell and when and where and how. They'll tell you, believe me.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may also say, Becky, one of the things when you're talking to the children, you can tell your son that someday he's going to have to learn how to be mature enough to do what his sister already knows how to do. And tell his sister that someday she's going to have to be mature enough, like her brother, to be able to do more of the kinds of things he does.
Yep. Yeah. He'll tell people, my sister doesn't see very well, and neither do I, but she really doesn't see very well.
Yeah. No, that's it comes with the testosterone, my dear. I'm so sorry to say. I don't know how much time we have left. I think it's running pretty short. Are there any final comments or questions before we have to bring our time together as a close?
This is Sheila again. Do you have any advice in terms of when you would recommend to get outside help, I guess, for self-esteem issues or, because I think a lot of parents do worry about peers and really, because that's when it gets very hard, to keep that self-esteem up, kind of they're in this bubble for a while. And then, as you're letting them out into the school doing advocate for themselves more, that's when peers tend to get more of an issue. Do you have just a recommendation, like things to when you would refer or ask for professional help, I guess?
Okay. It is my experience that you should make that call for assistance from a counselor or a therapist or a blindness professional the instant either mom or dad feels anxious. Okay? Why? Because one of the most important things you can be for your children is a non-anxious presence. It's okay to run into the bedroom, close the door after they're asleep, and, shake and jump up and down and scream and holler into a pillow and, bang bungee bats. And often when children are brought to see me, the most important work I do is with mom and dad, okay, to help them calm down, figure out what they need to do, figure out that they can't do everything, and, again, figure out how to be coaches to help their children do the things that their children need to do. Schools are, remember, I'm 63 years old. When I went to school, they might as well have painted a target on my back. Okay, part of the reason I became an Episcopal priest is I went to a religious school, and I used to hide at recess in the church because it was the only place I knew the kids wouldn't come and beat me up. And the teachers wouldn't help because that would mean I was a sissy. Well, thank God we're now no longer in the Dark Ages. there's lots of help to be had. And I would hope that you would find and create a network of people in the helping professions that you can trust, that can be with you, for the long haul, and people that you'll have confidence in, especially confidence that they will tell you gently but lovingly if they think you're making a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
And because one of the mistakes that sighted people make all the time is they think that because they see something, they see it right. Visually impaired people know for certain, moment by moment, that whatever we see, that's not all there is to it. And that's a good thing for everybody to know. The minute you feel anxious about something, make a call, have a consult, have a chat, and then, observe. Observe, inquire as the child gets old enough to speak with you. And I think, it's going to be as good as it's going to be, and they're going to grow up and give you aggravation and love you and, develop good enough mobility skills that they'll push your wheelchair at the nursing home, which is probably a really scary thought.
Thank you. Yeah, that's I like that answer. Is there anything else? Anyone has a quick question, or else, it's 8:00, so. Okay, we will be sending out evaluations. Could you please take some time to fill it out and give us your feedback? And Father Jim, thank you so much. This was a very...
thank you so very much. You know how hard it is for an Episcopalian to get a gig these days. We're such a little no, really, and I promise you, just love them and use your good judgment. You will make mistakes, and it won't matter. In fact, making mistakes can sometimes be helpful, because then you can say to the child, as they're old enough and in an age-appropriate way, oops, we goofed on that one. Oh, well, okay? So the last thing I want you all to say before you get off the phone is, oops, just got to try something else, oops. That's all it means. Most of these things are not life and death. So, just hang in there, and you'll be good enough parents, and your children will love you for it and be grateful beyond measure. So I wish you good night.
Thank you so much.